There is a war on food going on right now, and we're going to have to take a look at that right away. It is getting important. By the way, you should probably plant a garden. I'll tell you why in just a second. Hi, I'm Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity. This is a scouting report for those of you who aren't familiar with my scouting reports, because maybe you're new to Peak Prosperity or you're watching this out in public. I spend 7 days a week figuring out what's going on in the world, and at least 3 days a week, I am capturing my scouting findings for all of my followers. And so some of that goes out into the public, but most of that is back at Peak Prosperity for my subscribers who like to save time and know what's going on in the world, and trust me to be an impartial arbiter and finder of what's going on. Today, let's talk about this part here. Let me pull this up now, because this is really rather astonishing to me that we are actually in this place at all. Food wars. Whoops, make this full size. Food wars and climate change. Let's look at this right now. So this just came out in Yahoo News a couple days ago. It said farmers warn food aisles will soon be empty because of crushing conditions. We are not in a good position. There's the link down there. And this is really fascinating. So this applies to the UK. And apparently the UK, quote, is facing a dire food shortage, forcing prices to skyrocket. And experts predict this is only the beginning. Which experts? As you know, we're a little suspicious of experts these days, post-COVID and everything. According to a report by The Guardian, extreme weather is wreaking havoc on crops across the region. England experienced more rainfall during the past 18 months than it has over any 18-month period since record-keeping began in 1836. So that's a pretty long run, wouldn't you say? Carrying on, quote, because the rain hasn't stopped, many farmers have been unable to get crops such as potatoes, carrots, and wheat into the ground. Or out of the ground, because sometimes you leave the carrots and turnips, things like that, over the winter. Quote, farmers have also planted fewer potatoes, opting for less weather-dependent and financially secure crops. At the same time, many of the potatoes that have been planted are rotting in the ground. So having a little domestic food trouble here, producing it, and what is the problem, what is the cause, and what are the solutions? This is the interesting part. English farmers aren't alone. They go on to note in this article, people are struggling to grow crops worldwide because of what they're calling extreme weather. They've got dry weather in Brazil, heavy rain in Vietnam, etc., severe drought in Spain and Morocco, extra snowfall and rain in California. At any rate, they're saying, gosh, tough to cultivate olives for olive oil. Peru's blueberry yields cut in half this year compared to last year. Coffee, beer, wine, all have been impacted by extreme weather. So this is actually potentially a thing, or more likely, this is what happens any year. You look around, some areas are having good conditions for growing and some are having bad conditions for growing. So is it really a problem that we're having trouble with blueberries, coffee, and wine? Well, for some people, that would be a huge catastrophe. But it feels a little bit like cherry picking. So look at this down in yellow again, second part in yellow over there. Quote, according to an ABC News report, the strain on the agriculture industry will likely continue to cause food prices to soar, end quote. Actually, you know what's going to cause food prices to soar? Federal Reserve money printing and federal government fiscal deficits. That's called inflation. Here they're talking about demand supply shocks. So if we have less supply, and the demand is still there, price will go up, obviously, because price is a function of supply and demand. But actually, prices have been going up because of inflation due to monetary effects. So I just want to make sure we're clear about that. This article doesn't say, oh, food prices have been going up because of money printing. They are saying quite clearly, well, according to ABC News report, and of course, ABC News is your ultimate arbiter on why food prices might be going up, obviously. Don't need to fact check that one. End sarcasm. Carrying on, if these were just isolated events, farmers could more easily adapt. The problem is rising temperatures are directly linked to the increasing amount of gases such as carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere. Rising temperatures are directly linked, they say. A little bit less clear, potentially. So, but let's leave that for what it is. What's not clear is that the rising temperatures are directly linked to the blueberry and coffee problems that we're seeing around the world, or if those are just ordinary things. We don't know, right? But you can see the spin on this whole thing. And rising carbon dioxide and rising temperatures, I hate to tell you this, those are actually good for plants. Plants like more carbon dioxide. This is just a fact. This is why greenhouses, industrial greenhouses with a trapped environment, pump carbon dioxide into them specifically to foster more vigorous plant growth. And as well, I can tell you this, my plants like warmer versus colder temperatures to a point, right? All right, but let me go to, right, missed that one part. So they go on in this article to talk about how, well, this is all due to climate change, and we have a big problem going on here. And let's pull this up, because this is actually fascinating to watch how this goes. So let me grab this link right here, and we're going to go to this article now, because it's phenomenal to watch what they've been doing here and how they're linking this all to the stuff you've been hearing about, which includes climate change and the idea that you need to eat less meat. All right. So here's that article talking about farmers warning about food aisles being empty and things like that. Now let's go down here and find out. Yes. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, it says here, humans have burned dirty energy sources such as coal, oil, and gas, which release a significant amount of those gases. Dirty energy sources, as if carbon dioxide is a dirty thing. Look at the language. This is nudging. This is how they do it. Honestly, carbon dioxide is a necessary component. If we could get all the carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? It would be a bad thing. It would lead to the end of all plant life as we know it. That would be a bad thing. So how we characterize that as dirty or not is really a relative argument that needs to be made. And saying here, as climate change worsens, the threat to our food supply chains, both at home and overseas, will grow, according to Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit analyst Amber Sawyer. Fortunately, we know many ways that we can make the food system more resilient while reducing food emissions. The biggest opportunity, they say here, is in high-income nations is a reduction in meat consumption and exploration of more plants in our diet, says Dr. Paul Behrens, Associate Professor of Environmental Change at Leiden University in the Netherlands. More plant-based stuff. Now, which plants would those be exactly, Paul? Because curious minds have a lot of questions that we are going to ask about this. First up, I hope it's not fruits and vegetables, because those are hideously expensive. Most people cannot find the way to afford those right now. That is a problem. And when they say also, hey, we're going to eat more plants and less meat, let me remind Mr. Expert over here about this fact, which is that pasture land, a lot of pasture land, isn't suitable for veggies or grain productions or plant growth that we could eat. Here's two examples. You got highland, rocky, hilly sort of territory. You're not dipping a plow in that and getting corn to come out anytime soon. The other would be more dry land, grass range, and that also is not suitable for fruit and veggies. So this is actually one of the highest, best uses for grasslands, of course, is to have large herds on them. They like it. It's good for the pasture land. It's good for the pasture-raised animals that are on there. It's good for everybody. So this idea that meat is just like, oh, it's either competing with fruits and veggies or not, is absolutely cartoonish. And you could only really get that broken point of view from a professor who's never actually done any of this kind of activity in their life as well. Remember, it was in 2016, which, let me get my little drawn tool out here. Remember this from 2016, November 2016? World Economic Forum had 8 predictions for the world. Number 1 was you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, number 4 was you'll eat less meat. And they said, oh, it's an occasional treat, not a staple. Good for the environment and our health. Bad health comes from eating meat. Good health comes from eating things like, I don't know, corn syrup, I guess. I don't know. Very bizarre. But obviously they want us to eat less meat for reasons that are as yet undisclosed. So we don't know what those are, but the pressure is on. I'm going to have a full report this coming week, later in the week, about what's going on with the H5N1 threat that's hit the dairy herds, in particular in the United States of late. We're going to be talking about all the different threats to our food environment. But we saw back, when this first came out over the years, they tried to get us to eat less cows because cows are cute. So they tried personalizing them. They did the whole PETA thing. Remember PETA? People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. That was a big thing once. And if you heard about them lately, that didn't quite work out. So then they tried to convince us that these cows are farting. And so that's why they wanted to cull 200,000 cows out of the Irish herds, because climate change, while mysteriously never mentioning China's coal-fired power plants that are getting built week after week, somehow it's Irish cows. That's not really working out. Now we're going for this idea that, generally speaking, we need the land that the cows are on to grow fruits and vegetables, because that's good for the environment and good for your health. Again, unclear why they're going that direction. Now, if you really wanted people to grow more corn, for instance, or we wanted to do alternative energy, things like solar, wind, things like that, so that we could combat climate change, which is what they're directly linking all this to. It's climate change. For the climate, we need to have less cows and more fruits and veggies, I guess. If we're going to do that, then it would probably be a good idea to remind somebody over there in the financialization trading pits. This is corn prices in the futures market going back to 2008. The blue dotted line connects today with 2008 and shows that the price of corn, while wobbling around, has gone absolutely nowhere since 2008. Think about any other business charging exactly what they charged in 2008, and you will understand why this is a really squeezed industry. If you want more fruits and veggies, then you probably ought to allow the price to go up. But they don't, because the raccoons in charge of Wall Street who are in there, they like the price of commodities smashed all the way down to the price point where the commodities producers are barely surviving. 2-3% margins, right? Literally the same nominal price of corn that's in your box of cornflakes is being given to the producers today as in 2008, right? Way over there, 2008, as same as today. Okay. That assures that we're not actually getting a lot more production out. And by the way, when you have zero extra margin in your business, you know what happens? You have to run the leanest possible shop you can. You can't do the right things like let your soils lie fallow for once every 7 years, as it says we should do, right in the Bible. It's encoded in there as human instructions of wisdom. Maybe we should let our soils rest now and then for the health of the soils, which gives us better, more nutrient dense, better foods in the future. But you can't afford to do that when you're operating on a 2%, 3% margin. Obviously, a box of cornflakes does not cost today as it cost back in 2008. It costs a multiple, 2x, 3x more. But for the farmers, they're getting exactly 0x more between back then and today, even though all their costs have gone up, right? Property taxes have gone up through the roof through this period of time. Fuel costs have gone up. Fertilizer costs have gone up. Seed costs have gone up. Labor costs have gone up. Everything has gone up except the price they receive for their commodity. So pro tip to all these university professors out there thinking, oh, we just need people eating more fruits and veggies. You will get more and better, not just calories, but nutrient density if we could incentivize the producers to get a little more taste out of the situation, but they're not getting that taste. How about for wheat? Same thing, except they're getting less today than they were getting in 2008 by a pretty wide margin. So not getting more wheat, not getting more corn, and don't even get me started on the cost of vegetables. If you've been shopping, suggesting that people should eat less meat and more veggies is a really stupid thing to do unless those people happen to be rich, let alone wanting to eat organic stuff that's not sprayed with all manner of ridiculous glyphosate and neonicotinoids and all the other pesticides and fumigants and fungicides that they happen to use now. In order to farm profitably today, you are forced into this pesticide, chemical, fungicide universe that's just awful for everybody. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for the world. It's bad for the people who consume this stuff. It's bad for the animals. It's not a good system. It's a really bad system, but they want to shove us down into that system. And that's what I'm objecting to here today in the way they phrase that article. Now, what's interesting is that we look at total global crop reserves. So some portion of reserve of crops are set aside in reserve. And so this is the percent, and you can see very, very low amounts here are actually held in reserve overall. These are tiny amounts. If that they say here percent, I'm not sure. I couldn't find if they labeled this chart correctly. If this is a percent, these are all fractions of a percent then. So if that's the case, One thing you can see for sure, though, is that the U.S. has decided on a percentage basis it's going to keep less and less and less and less. And China's decided that it needs to keep more and more and more and more in reserve. It's a general trend. Makes sense because China's not a dummy in the story. Same thing when you look at the global crop stock to use ratio. You see how much of the global stocks are in the world, excluding China, has been going down. And of course, China has also been sort of trending upward, so dragging the whole world up. That's interesting. Now, if you're in the UK, the other thing you got to worry about, of course, you're in Europe, which means that because your natural gas consumption has been curtailed of the use of Russian pipeline gas, your Nord Stream pipelines got blown up by somebody, right? And you are now foreclosed upon importing cheap gas from Russia, and as well the Groningen field in Holland is now closed down, and there are a lot of issues. So they have to import LNG. LNG is too expensive to make fertilizer from. So now they're importing fertilizer from Russia. Way to go there. I'm not sure you thought that one all the way through. What's interesting, though, is this is deindustrializing Europe very, very rapidly. So the UK farm issues, all of farming in Europe, you're going to be dependent on the rest of the world. If you do not wake up to this and stop this process, you cannot be haranguing and harassing your farmers and telling them they're bad people and telling them that they have to take on enormous costs to reduce nitrogen emissions because you care as a bureaucratic administrative class in Brussels about climate change, even though you all fly around and you have, private homes and cars and jets and all that other stuff. Leaving that aside, it must be the farmers. Don't be stupid, Europe. Treat your farmers well. Give them a little more taste on the whole income value chain stream. Maybe just a little. You could double farmers' fees and receipts, and you wouldn't even barely notice it at the grocery store if you just dinged a few of the other middlemen along the way. You wouldn't even notice it at all. So deindustrialization of Europe is happening. This is a really big deal. And what's interesting in that Financial Times article, something I've never seen them do before, is they actually compared population on the y-axis here against the overall on time, looking at the administration of fertilizers, making the connection that there's some connection between humans and food. More food, you can support more people. And food is grown with the use of more fertilizers, in particular nitrogenous fertilizers like ammonia and things like that. That's what you see in the top line. So that's pretty amazing that they've done that. So here's where I go with this. Listen, folks, you've heard me say it before, plant a garden. You're going to do this because you will have greater food security and you're going to have greater nutrient density because you're going to be careful about making sure that you have the right micronutrients landing back in your plant so that when you eat those veggies from your garden, not only do you have the satisfaction of that, but there'll be higher levels of magnesium and calcium and boron and sulfur and all the things you need in there because you've taken care to put those back into your garden. Or you got to find somebody who's doing the gardening locally to you, who's thinking this way and can talk this kind of language with you about that nutrient density. It's a very important concept. So plant a garden for your own security, but also for your own health. Evie and I, there she is, love of my life. We just got more cows just delivered today. So that's actually our farm. That's a picture taken from this morning. We got 4 of these little things. That's just one of them. And that's full size. These are dwarf cows. That's how big they're. It's a little in the background, but they're tiny. They come up, I can hold my arm out to my side and their shoulders are still below my hand. So if I just hold my arm out straight while I'm standing, that's awesome. But these things can take that greenery and turn it into cool stuff like butter, right? So making fats out of grasses, what an amazing miracle of chemistry is going on there. The sun comes down, makes the grass gets eaten by the cow. Next thing you know, you get butter. A couple steps in there I might have skipped. But at any rate, we're very happy to be doing this. And we do this because this is good for our land. It's good for our soil. We're walking the talk. I don't just say plant a garden like some internet guru who's saying things that they're not doing. I know how much work this is. And I know what the rewards are. I'm very eyes wide open about that. We also have chickens, and they're laying all different sort of spectrums of eggs because we got a variety of different breeds. And this is that's a Norwood sawmill. I got a sawmill. I call it Dr. Norwood. That's where I go for my afternoon therapy sessions when I can't stand what the WEF is up to anymore. Time to saw a log. Now, that raises an important point. It is really critical what your mental health is through all of this. If you're feeling fractured and isolated, if you're feeling alone with this kind of information, if you are feeling maybe even a little bit desperate or anxious about it, I want to invite you to our National Peak Prosperity Summit. It's going to be this year, it's going to be in New Hampshire, September 13th through the 15th. 15th is my birthday. It's going to be some fun stuff on that day. And it's being held at the lodge at Camp Robindel there on Lake Winnipesaukee up in New Hampshire. It's that weekend is an amazing weekend for leaves potentially. They'll start to turn. So if you haven't been in New England for that time of year, wonderful thing. And we have to limit this at just about 400 people. So, because that's the size that we can feed and house everybody. And there is housing available here on site for people who want it, or there's nearby hotels. So we would love to have you there. And if you can come, it is going to be for your mental health. And we'll have lots of programs and interesting people and fun things to learn and great things. Come to that right there. If you go to that link down there, you will be able to read about all the wonderful things we're going to do and the benefits and the agenda and all of that. So we would love to have you there. That would be fantastic. And now I'm going to end this here, and I'm going to ask all my Peak Prosperity subscribers to follow me over to Peak Prosperity, because I got a lot more to tell you about financially. The data that just came in this morning, as well as yesterday, looks like the recession is here. That's jobs data, that's housing data, a variety of things like that. So we got to look at that data, because it's going to have huge impacts on where things go over the next few months. So with that, thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and see you next time. Plant a garden. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.